Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to go over the Hand History Analyzer. If you're looking to improve your game, this is going to be the tool that's going to take you to the next level. So first I'm going to show you guys how to upload your hands using the Analyzer tool. It's very simple. All you have to do is go to the top of the page here and you'll see an Analyze button. You'll get two drop downs, Uploads and Hands, right up here. And all you have to do is click on the Uploads. In order to upload a hand history or a file to GTO Wizard, all you have to do is find the location where you save your file. I save mine on the desktop, so it's fairly easy for me to just take the file from the desktop that I save my hand histories to and go to the Upload section, and you'll see a little window here comes up that you can click and paste your hand history for the single hands. But if you want to upload a file, you can just click the Files button, and you can just take this file and drag it right into the Upload section here, and GTO Wizard will upload the file and analyze it within a few hours, if not sooner. So once all of the files are uploaded, you'll see that we get to this page here. This is where it's going to tell you all of the total hands that were uploaded, how many correct plays you made, how many wrong plays you made, and what your average EV loss was. So when you're looking through these statistics, just keep in mind that there's a few caveats to GTO Wizard. One, the analyzer cannot analyze multi-way scenarios. So you're not going to be able to analyze multi-way spots like four-handed or three-handed post-flop. Another caveat is that certain stack depths aren't supported. So if you're playing like 500 big blinds deep, you're not going to see an option for that in GTO Wizard. So typically the analyzer is going to be able to analyze anything from roughly 200 big blinds, a little bit over, and down. So if you have any hands where you played a heads-up scenario versus another player at about 200 big blinds or down, it'll come up in the into the analyzer. So this is the session that I played today. Right here, you can see the date and the name of the file that I used to upload, the amount of hands, and then how many hands I played correct and how many mistakes I made and what my average EV loss was. So I've been using this tool for a really long time, almost around the time that GTO Wizard even came out. And you can see I have a lot of hands in the database already that I've just been uploading because every day I upload my hands and every day I look through all of my mistakes and see what I can do better. So I've already had close to 440,000 hands uploaded. And you can see here that it tells me what my average correct plays are, what my wrong plays were, and what my average EV loss was. And so the way that I use this tool is I look over all of the hands and I sort between what my biggest average EV losses hands were, what the biggest pots that I played were, and any hands that I marked during the session or thought about trying to look at later for review. So let's open up the first file here that I analyzed, which was today's session. It'll bring you to another page here, which is just your analyzed hands. So like I said, you can sort them for different things. You can sort them for the date you played, the status, what site it was, if you're uploading multiple files or something like that, what the format was, EV loss, big blinds, one loss. So that's going to be if you want to sort for big pots. The pot size, if you just want to sort for a big pot in general, not whether you won it or lost it, just how big the pot was. What your position was and what cards you had and what board textures there were and what actions there were. So there's a lot of different things here, but you are going to only be able to sort between the EV loss, the big blinds, one loss, the pot, and the others are just going to tell you exactly, what the position was or who the hero was, etc. So looking at the first thing, EV loss, you can click here and you'll see that it'll automatically sort all of your hands to the biggest EV loss that you experienced during the session. So you can see the first hand that pops up at the top here, I lost negative 4.18. So this is a pretty big EV loss, which means I probably made a big blunder in the hand. And if I want to check how I played the hand, I can click on it here and it'll bring up the hand history on the right. So once you get the hand history here, you can go through the actual hand and see where your mistake was. We're going to go over some actual hands that I played in a minute, but first I just wanted to continue to show you how else you can sort the hands to look at later on. So that's the EV loss that you can sort. You can also sort to see if you made any good plays. But typically I would just use this tool to sort for the big mistakes and then go over the mistakes. This particular session, I didn't have too many mistakes, so it's actually going to be easier for me to review this session. Then looking at the big blinds won or lost. So like I said, you can sort for your bigger pots that you played. So I played a bunch of big pots. You can see here, I won a pot that was 300 big blinds today. And I also won another pot that was 284 big blinds. So pretty good session today. If I sort for the pots that I lost, you can see the biggest pot I lost was 34 big blinds. So again, yeah, lucky session. Not a lot of variance in this one, but I do want to sometimes look at these medium size pots as well. It's not always just going to be important to look at the top pots that you won and the top pots that you lost. Also, you can look through some of the middling stacked pots, depending on what you want to look through. And then again, you can just put up the pot function here, and you can see when there was a huge pot played in the games you were in. This doesn't necessarily include you in the hand. So it's important to note that if you do sort by pot, it's not going to include your actual action. It's going to just be two players played a big pot together. So that's why I like to either sort by the EV loss or the big blinds won and lost. Those are going to be the two main ones that I use. So let's take a look at how I analyze the hands after they're analyzed. Okay, first hands I pull up here. I like to always open the replay hand function here because it just gives you a bigger view of what's going on. And it also gives you this nice little UI here to show you all of the different options that you could have used. So for this scenario, it looks like the button opened, we had ace queen offsuit, and we go for a 3-bet. I've modeled my game to represent what Wizard uses in sizes. So I'm typically going to use the same sizings that Wizard uses, but if you use a different size, that's okay, because Wizard will adjust your play to fit what Wizard is going to do. So let's say you raise to 10 BBs out of the big blinds, but Wizard wants to use a 13 big blind sizing. It'll adjust your 10 big blinds to the 13 big blinds that Wizard is using. You can also change what solutions you use in the options menu as well. If you wanted to use different options, you can go up to the settings and you can see the analyzer, and you can choose which hands you want to use, or which solutions rather, that you want to use for the analyzer. So if you're studying with something like 50 NL simple, you can use that for the hand history analyzer, and it'll upload all of the hands assuming that you want to play the NL50 simple solutions. So personally, I use the 500 general as I mostly play 500 NL online. I also mix in some 200 NL as well. So I think if you're going to play 200 or 500, the best solutions are going to be the 500. If you play something like 100 or 50 NL, then I would suggest using the 50 NL solutions. And if you play anything under 50 NL, then 50 NL is going to be the solutions for you. So yeah, I typically use the general 500. And like I said, I modeled my game to represent all of the sizings that Wizard is going to use. So you can see I raised to 13 big blinds, as I know Wizard likes to use a 13 BB raise out of the big blind versus button in this scenario. And villain 4-bets to 28. So we're going to mix between call and shove here. I didn't actually know that I can shove versus the button in this scenario. So that's something I'm already kind of taking note in my mind. Also, the fact that the fold option is 0 EV, that was also a surprise to me. I didn't think I was going to be able to fold, but you can see the little blue here in the bar representing the fold frequency. which means that if you have a button that's going to be 4-betting very tight ranges and not enough weak hands, this might be a really good candidate to just 3-bet fold against that player. So yeah, we end up calling and seeing a flop. Flop is ace king 6. I go for the check. That's good. So you can just go forward in the hand to see every single part of the hand and see where you made a mistake or didn't make a mistake. So far, no mistakes made. We kind of learned a couple of things about the frequency of ace-queen offsuit preflop. And villain bets what looks to be around 33% sizing, which is a bit large since GTO Wizard is typically going to want to use a 25% sizing in this scenario. So that's represented by the white here where it says bet 25%. And then in the parentheses is what the sizing the villain actually used. So again, Wizard is going to take that sizing and try and fit it into the sizings that it already has for the solutions. That being said, if a villain uses a different sizing, the hand history analyzer will still show you the proper frequency versus that sizing. But if you wanted to dive deep into the hand and open up the spot, which you can do here with this button, you'll see that when you open up the spot, it defaults to the 25% sizing that the button ended up, was supposed to use according to the solutions of GTO Wizard. So I'll get to the spot analysis in a minute, but going back to the hand in question, and the spot, we'll continue versus the 33%. So we're assuming this is a 33% bet. So against that, we can call. We can also shove. I elected to call. And then the turn, we turn the nut flush draw with the queen of diamonds. I check. Button decides to check back. And I went all in. This was a spot that in game, I kind of thought maybe I should have a smaller sizing and an all-in sizing. But it looks like Wizard doesn't really want me to have an all-in sizing here. And to check whether or not I should have an all-in sizing, I can go and click study the spot again. And then we can take a look at the range that Wizard, in fact, wants to go all in with. And we can look here. There's a 5.4% frequency of going all in. So it's not zero, but the combos that we're going to go all in with don't include the ace queen with the queen. And I think this might have something to do with the fact that we're blocking a lot of the calling range from villain with the ace in our hand. Because if you see here, I assume if big blind goes all in, that the button is going to have to call a lot of ace X combos, and that's where we get our value from the flush. So we can click call here, and then it'll highlight all of the calling hands. And you can see, like I was saying, a lot of the calls are going to come from hands like ace king, ace 8, ace 7, ace 3, ace 2, all having that ace that we actually are blocking in our hand. So we're not going to get a lot of calls when we're blocking the range that villain is going to call with. Makes sense. So it looks like Wizard elects to mostly check my combo in particular. And I guess in hopes that, the villain is going to have some of the bluffs that they're going to have. So if we check here, then button is going to have to bluff at a certain frequency. Hands like queen 9 of hearts is even in their range here. A lot of different combos are going to have to bluff the river. And we're not blocking those combos with our ace of spades or our ace of whatever we had. So we're unblocking the bluffs. We're blocking the hands that are mostly going to check back, like ace 8, ace 7. And then even sometimes ace king can even shove. So if they do have those combos, they're going to shove anyway. So the times that we shove and are blocking those calls and they have to fold, and the times that we check and they have to shove those hands, that's just going to be a better EV play for our particular holding with the queen of diamonds. Even though we have the nuts, it's going to prove to be better to check in that scenario. So looking at like another hand, let's pull up this one here. This is pocket threes on the cutoff, and it looks like we are going to be analyzed for a deeper scenario. So you can tell what the scenario is solved for by looking over here underneath the pre-flop section. So you can see that the solver used the 200 big blind solutions for this particular hand because cutoff was played with the button, and we're both pretty deep stacked here. So this is what I was saying earlier by sometimes you can still use the 200 big blinds solution for a 250 big blind scenario, but just keep in mind that it's going to be a bit inaccurate, especially if there's some scenario where you just end up shoving all of your chips. GTO Wizard might simplify that to try and fit the 200 big blind solution. So looking through this one, we open the cutoff, button 3 bets, and at 200 bigs deep, we're just never folding threes. We're pretty much continuing with any pair. So I end up calling here, and we flop a set. Pretty dream scenario for a deep stack spot. I end up checking, and villain bets small. First off, I'm really curious about villain's small bet here. I'm not sure that villain wants to be sizing down this much in position on a board texture like this. I think this sizing is more fit for some other scenarios, but because we're so deep stacked, I could see this maybe being good as well. But if I wanted to double check it, again, I'm going to open up the spot tool, and I can go through and look back at what the button wants to do in this scenario. And so you can see here, the button is mostly going to use a 50% sizing, a 33% sizing, and very rarely a 20% sizing, which is what villain used, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, let me double check here. What did they use? Let's go back to the uploads and pull up the hands. So it looks like if I look in the hand history, yeah, villain used about a 28% sizing in practice. So it simplified it to the 33% size that GTO Wizard wants to use. So that's probably fine. Not a big mistake there. If villain went a little smaller than the 28% sizing, I could see that being a mistake because it's a very low frequency play here by Wizard, given the option. And so the mistake that we actually made was we just flat called here. In game, I thought this would be a good spot to have some really strong hands out of position to be calling with, especially since this board texture is very dynamic. A lot of different draws can come in on turn river that make pocket threes no good. And so I thought we could have some really strong hands in our range for check calling out of position, and what better hands to check call with than sets, especially bottom set, because there is even some reverse implied odds that we end up check raising here and getting it in versus 9s or 10s and get stacked. So I thought that if there was going to be a hand to slow play out of position, it would be one with a lot of vulnerability that still has a lot of strength and can continue to call multiple streets. But yeah, alas, I think the solver wants us to just push this and raise the 100% sizing a lot of the time. So I made a mistake there, but it wasn't exactly a huge mistake. If you look at the EV, you can see all of the EV for the different options, and call was just barely below raise 100 and raise 60. And so you'll often see if the EV is close to the same, that the solver is going to use a bunch of different options. But in this case, the call option is just a bit too low compared to the other raise options. And so it mostly wants to just raise in this scenario. So because the EV was still close, GTO Wizard classifies this as an inaccuracy. So there's a certain threshold for inaccuracies before they become blunders. And blunders are the biggest mistakes that you can make. And that's something you don't want to be doing in the hand. So an inaccuracy is pretty close, but still not going to be a line the solver is going to use. So they might not be at the top priority for you to try and fix in your game, but it is important to not make too many inaccuracies because, of course, they do add up. So turn, I ended up checking and villain checked back. And then I wasn't really sure what sizing scheme I wanted to use here on the river, but it looks like the solver really wants us to go big. We have a really strong hand now. Villain showed a lot of weakness. We have the top of our range. You know, villain could still have some ace X that calls this huge bet with. And I really like that the solver wants to use the 300 sizing. I thought about that in game, but because I wasn't really sure, I just went with the large size. And so I ended up betting 71%, which this was a blunder. You can tell the EV is a lot different here, and we're losing a decent amount of EV if we're only betting this small sizing. So this was a spot where I picked up a mistake, and I would, in the future, be more sure to use the more polar sizings when my opponent in position shows some weakness, and I have an uncapped range that has a lot of really strong hands. So now that we've looked at a couple of the top EV losses, let's look at one of the biggest pots that I've played. We can look at something like this. So this is actually a very unique scenario because this was against a recreational player. So I'll show you guys how Wizard looks at some of the suboptimal sizings used in game. So first off, hijack opens to 3x, which is not typically a sizing that Wizard is going to use. So again, it's going to adjust it to the 2.5x. And then for us, we're supposed to be 3-betting to about 10 BBs in position because we are deeper on the button. So I missed this size as well. I could have went to 10 BBs, but instead in game, I went to 8 BBs. So I 3-bet to 8. Hijack calls, flop. I don't think there's going to be a lot of leading from the hijack. So this, again, isn't really a scenario that's used by GTO Wizard, but that's okay because it can resolve for the sizing that's used. And you'll see the response that we are supposed to take to an approximate level. So it's not going to be perfect like it would be if villain used a decision that was an actual strategy in GTO Wizard, but because they ended up just leading something like 75% on the flop or whatever it was they led, there is no option for that, as you can see here. Most of the time, hijack is just going to check. So going back to the hand, you'll see that villain, in fact, did just kind of lead half pot here, but Wizard is still going to have an answer. Now, like I said, this isn't going to be a super accurate answer, but it's going to give us a good enough approximation of what we should be doing here. So you can tell the EV is different, even though the strategy is split, which isn't usually the case. If there's a higher EV option like this, usually the solver is going to just pick this at a pure frequency. But because this isn't going to be solved to the accuracy that the other solution and strategies are, it's an approximation once again. So that's why we see the difference in EV, but the solver wants to mix these two decisions. And then so it's something like a solver noise, if you've heard that term before. So again, just make sure you're analyzing this with caution. So I ended up calling, and then on the turn, again, I could have mixed between raise and call, but I decided call. So again, there's still some, this isn't really a thing in GTO Wizard. So we have this unique scenario, and then by the river, villain just shoves. So at this point, you can see that the EV is close to 0 on both decisions. We're facing what we think is approximately a hijack range for leading 3 streets. But what it came down to was I thought I was blocking the nuts with the ace of spades. We have a really strong hand here. If we're folding this hand, we're probably just folding everything except for a flush or trips, which, I think that's a bit exploitable. So I decided to make the call here, and luckily villain just showed up with a random ace-queen offsuit, and I was happy to see that and ship the pot. But using the hand history analyzer, just be careful when you see a lot of sizings that are out of the norm. The accuracy might not be completely reliable. The times that you want to use the hand history analyzer and really go into depth is when villain is using approximate sizings that are close to GTO Wizard, as well as you're using the strategy as well, and you'll get a really good scenario to study and better your play. Lastly, let's put it all together and look at a hand that we lost some EV in and how we're going to learn from that and adjust in the future. So we're going to sort by EV loss once again, and we'll take this pocket eights hand as a option. There we go. Okay. So pocket eights in the hijack, we open to 2 big blinds. You can see that this was solved for 100 BBs. I think villain used some very similar sizings to GTO Wizard, so that's great. Flop, Jack 4 against the big blind. We go ahead and c-bet. We're supposed to c-bet at a pretty high frequency here. So we do. And I get check raised. It looks like we don't have too many other options other than just call, which is what I end up doing. And turn is a 6 of spades. Villain goes ahead and bets again, half pots. Now, this is a sizing I think I wasn't ready to see. I thought villain would polarize a bit more on the turn because they're effectively representing that they have trips, but they do have some weaker hands in their range for check raising the flop, like pocket 7s, pocket 6s. Now that makes a boat, but on the flop, they could have check raised some weaker hands that maybe want to go for a smaller sizing. So let me look at what sizing Wizard wants to use after it check raises the flop. So Wizard looks to check raise the flop, and then on the turn, the big blind is mostly going to mix between 75, 50, 33, and 175. Those are going to be the most common sizings right here. So yeah, villain did well to bet the 50 sizing. And that leaves, like I said, their range a little less polar, so they can have some more merged hands. Maybe they can even have some pocket queens in this scenario, or something like pocket 10s, perhaps. And we can double check that in the range here. We can see that there's a small frequency of pocket 10s. Or maybe villain wants to continue betting something like a flush draw, some weaker trips even, so something like Jack 5 suited. So it doesn't really want to polarize yet with a big part of the range, so it looks like we're using a lot of the 50% sizing. So that's something that I'm going to learn next time I check raise a paired board out of position. Maybe I'm going to use a sizing like 50%. That's not so polar. And then on the other side of the coin, for us, it looks like we're going to just continue with 8s at a pretty high frequency, but with the diamond, it looks like that hand wants to start mixing in some folds. So let's go back to the hand. So on the turn, it looks like we have a fairly standard call, but we can do some mixed folding because, again, we're blocking this 8 of diamonds, which is going to block the weaker hands of big blind. And typically, you don't want to be doing that in this scenario. Now, this is where I can learn something because clearly I made a bad fold against the small size. Villain goes for the small size on the river, which I thought was pretty interesting because villain can still have a lot of strong hands even with the sizing. A lot of their flushes get there, but also they have a lot of trips with like a weak kicker, or even some merged hands in there that don't really want to be betting large. So I assume that this sizing is going to contain a lot of weak trips with a weak kicker and even some flushes. I don't know if they have a large sizing, so what I would first do is look again back at the sizing that is used by Wizard. So I'm learning not only my own play, but also the play of the other player. so that I can mimic that in my own game. It looks like the big blind does in fact not want to bet a large sizing here. It only wants to bet a small sizing at a fairly high frequency. So there is a lot of like weak trips here that want to be betting for value, but doesn't want to go for a large sizing, since we can still have a flush, we can still have better trips, we can still have pocket kings or pocket sixes or pocket fours. And so something like Jack 5 of hearts does not want to bet large, but it still wants to get value from our weaker medium strength hands. And then you have some, flushes that are also weaker flushes. And then you can even filter for some of the bluffs if you want to take a look at the trash hands. Those are going to come up. So hands like Queen 10 of clubs look to be bluffing in this node. So pretty interesting. This is something I would explore if I was curious. Okay, well, if they're betting this sizing, like what are they bluffing, right? Like what do their bluffs look like? I would come over to here into the filters, look for the weak hands, look for the trash hands, highlight those, click on the sizings that are most often used, and then kind of go through the combos and try and find some heuristics for what hands I think make sense as a bluff, right? So if we see here, Queen 10 of clubs is a pretty high frequency bluff. That makes sense to check raise the flop because we had the backdoor straight and flush draws with the Jack of clubs on the board. And then it looks like it just wanted to continue betting here. And then once the flush comes in, we need some bluffs that are not going to be diamonds. So this one actually makes a lot of sense to bluff because it's probably blocking hands that we're going to call with, like queens with a diamond. And we can double check what exactly the combos are that it's blocking. So if we go to 10% here, and then we go to my calling frequency, we'll see the hands that I'm calling or raising, whether or not the Queen of clubs is an important card, right? So we can go look through the queens. So here's one of the combos I was talking about, queens with a club and a diamond. That's going to do a lot of calling. So we're blocking that from the range as the big blind. And then also, let's see, anything else? Looks like Queen Jack offsuit. That's also going to be in the range of the hijack. So we're blocking that combo, which is really good. So anytime we're blocking the hijack's calls as the big blind, that's going to be a pretty good hand to bluff, right? So again, the Queen of clubs is really blocking these combos here. Queen Jack offsuit and Queen Queen, these make up a big portion of the range. And so if we're blocking those, it's more likely that they're going to have something that they're folding. And then, of course, since we only have Queen High as the big blind bluffing the 10% sizing, we'll see that if we can get them to fold any pocket pairs here, that's huge, right? So that's really nice. Even though the sizing is only 10%, you're going to be stuck here with a combo that's going to have a difficult decision, and you're going to get those combos to fold. So nice spot for villain to size down on the river. And that's something I'm going to take a note on too, is when the board changes like that, maybe I should have more of a smaller sizing. And let's continue to look at how I played it. So I should have called the small sizing on the river. It looks like the EV isn't even close. This is a big call. Losing 1.6 EV by folding in this scenario. I'm getting a great price, and now we know that villain is capable of having some of those bluffs. So I really need to be calling hands like this, especially one that's blocking the flush. It's blocking a lot of the value that villain could have had for check raising the flop, like ace, not ace 8, but something maybe like 10-8 of diamonds that was, taking this line. Any of the flushes with an 8 of diamonds, basically. So I should have found the call here, and we know the hands that they're supposed to bluff. And if you think that they're not in game, then this might be a good adjustment to make some big folds on the river, right? Like if you don't think that they're going to be bluffing hands like Queen 10 of clubs on the river here, then maybe it's better to just fold these hands that are closer decisions. But in a perfect equilibrium, we should have called, and I made a mistake here. So that's something that I'm going to, in the future, make the call if villain is going to give me that proper sizing on the river, and I think that villain is going to show up with enough bluffs. So to summarize how to use the hand history analyzer, first you just upload your session, whether it's a single hand you want to review or a full session, you can upload either. Then you want to sort using the EV tool or the big blinds won or lost, and then you can sort through all of your hands that way. You want to look through the biggest mistakes and you want to analyze why you made the mistakes. You want to make sure that all of the sizings that were used were the sizings that are used by GTO Wizard. And you want to use all of the tools that you have on GTO Wizard to analyze the hands. So using, all of the reports, all of the data, and anything that you want to learn, you can dive deeper into so that you can understand why the solver is using the strategy that it's using. That's probably the hardest one to get good at, but will take, like everything else, time before you really understand how the solver thinks. But then once you kind of get a good idea and hang of it, then you'll be able to replicate how the solver plays in your own game, and you'll also understand why. So in order to better absorb all of the new info, it's important to take notes. I always take notes after a study session if I've learned anything significant or if I've come across something that I didn't know previous. And rinse and repeat. You really just got to grind it out and study. All of the tools are available to you. It's just a matter of whether you're going to be motivated and can get in that lab and work really hard, because it's going to show and it's going to be very rewarding when you do look through your mistakes, figure out why, and then apply them next time they come up. I don't think there's anything else that is more rewarding in poker than to better your game and continue your journey to crushing. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I'm going to be continuing to make some videos in the future. Also, if you have any other comments or questions, please leave them in the comments section below. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one.